So hello everyone, and thank you very much for making the time to join our webinar series, Inspiration, Insights and Learning on Women-Owned Enterprises Amid COVID-19, where we're looking at strategies to support survival, revival, and recovery. My name is Doreen Zhao, and I'm in charge of knowledge management for MSc Anglophone Africa. Now, before we start, just want to mention a few housekeeping issues. Let's keep our microphones and videos on mute or off when we are not speaking, and then also try to remember to switch on your video while speaking so that we can have a good face-to-face interaction. And then lastly, we'll use the chat box function to drop questions. If you have any questions as we move along with the conversation, drop them there and we will address this in the Q&A session. Now, today we are here to have a conversation around how women enterprises have fared amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm sure you'll all agree with me that the pandemic has posed an existential crisis on micro, small, and medium enterprises, especially those owned and operated by women. A study conducted by MSc reports that about 69% women experienced a reduced income as compared to men at 58%. In light of this, we are here to examine in great detail the challenges women entrepreneurs have faced, and more importantly, brainstorm some of the ways in which governments, donors, and financial service providers can support these entrepreneurs to build back better. Now, allow me to quickly take you through the agenda for this session. We shall kickstart the webinar with real conversations from the ground. With us today, we have Rehab, Nasima, and Semhal. These are three women entrepreneurs who will share with us experiences of the entrepreneurship journey during the COVID pandemic and how they've managed to overcome these challenges in order to keep their businesses afloat. Semhal Gwesh is an architect by profession and is a founder and CEO of Cabana Leather, a leather manufacturing company in Ethiopia. Through her passion for design, coupled with hard work and resilience, she has propelled Cabana to become one of the leading leather companies in Ethiopia, employing over 130 staff, of which 80% are women, majorly from vulnerable communities. Welcome, Semhal. Rehab Wangare is a director and co-founder at Hepta Analytics Limited, a data analytics startup based in Kigali, Rwanda, focusing on helping SMEs leverage data and insights to improve their processes and make data-driven decisions. Prior to Hepta, Rehab has worked as a business intelligence consultant with Verve KO Limited in Nairobi, Kenya, data analytics research consultant for Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company in the United States, as well as a software developer and business intelligence support at Equity Bank Kenya Limited. Welcome, Rehab. Finally, we have Nasima Akhtar, who is the founder and president of Women and E-Commerce, in bracket WE, a trust dedicated to help Bangladeshi women, micro-entrepreneurs, to advance in every step of their entrepreneurial journey. At present, she serves as a joint secretary of the E-Commerce Association of Bangladesh, that's ECAB. She is also the managing director of Reverie Corporation Limited. Welcome, Nasima. Now, after this session, we shall then move to a conversation with our esteemed panelists comprising gender-focused chief executives of philanthropic organizations to discuss the impact, challenges, opportunities, and way forward. After this panel discussion, we'll have a very brief Q&A session. So as I said, kindly just use the chat box as we move along. We'll consolidate all these questions and address them at this point. We will then bring the session to an end with some closing remarks by Graham Wright, who is the MSc Group Managing Director. Now, without much further ado, let's quickly move to our conversation with Rehab, Semhal, and Nasima. I'll start with you, Rehab. Would you just please tell us a little about yourself? That is your professional journey.
So my professional journey started as a business analyst back in Equity Bank Limited. But right now I'm a founder at Hepta Analytics Limited, where we focus on data analytics and providing solutions to SMEs. Our clients are not only in Africa, but they are all across the globe. So at Hepta Analytics, we achieved these through three key steps, which is infrastructure, second is analytics, and then visualization and guiding the client, as well as evaluation, probably after 1 year after we implement the solution. So that's our major focus at work. We are also into fintech, but in the grassroots, a topic for another day.
Thank you so much, Rehab. Now, we are all aware that COVID-19 has had unprecedented negative effects on businesses and generally the economies of across the globe, especially so on women-owned enterprises. I'm very certain you have not been spared. Tell us about the challenges you have faced due to this pandemic, and also just touch on what your aspirations are and your outlook on business is in the post-pandemic world.
All right, so the major challenge that we have faced is finance to sustain the businesses. At Hepta Analytics, we have been bootstrapping, where we consult and use the consulting profit to fund our in-house projects. But with COVID, our clients were impacted, which meant they terminated their contracts with us. Others were not able to meet their end of the bargain, and we couldn't be able to get new clients from the market. That means we had to leverage on the money that we had saved, but you cannot do that for such a long time. So that's one of the challenge. Second challenge was working from home. As women, you are the caretaker for the family. So if you're working from home, your parents, your kids are around. So this led to an imbalance where you don't have work-life balance as you'd want, leading to mental health issues for some of us. And another challenge that we face basically is our finance to, let's say, our capital or grants actually to put through our products to market. We had been developing products, but they were just one step to the market. With the COVID-19, there were no grants. You couldn't be able to afford to pay our external people who could market your product to take it to the market. So I'd say finances, our businesses, and mental health are major key that faced our health analytics.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Rehab. And I'm sure from the conversations that we will have and that will emanate from today's discussion, you'll definitely pick one or two things that can help you build back better from where you are. Now, over to you, Semal. Can we get your perspective on the same, starting with a brief introduction of yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good evening from the side of the world. My name is Samhad Bush. I'm the CEO and founder of Cabana Design PLC. We are mainly a leather producing company, leather bags. We export it, but we have three most important pillars. One is quality, community, and
Simhan, sorry to interrupt. Could you be a little louder?
Yes.
Is it better now?
Could hear you better. Yeah, a little better. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so CEO and founder of Cabana Design PLC. I have been in the business for the last 10 years. We are mainly another design and production company, but most importantly, we recruit, train majorly women and give permanent dignified jobs. So that has been my journey, and I've been very focused on it for the last 3 years. To give my perspective on the question that you raised, Doreen, I think I have already mentioned that it was most challenging for every businesses all over the world, and our business was not much more different than that. Our contracts were all terminated, and we had to quickly think on our feet and repurpose because we had a large amount of salaries that we have to keep, and then most importantly, our employees are employees that have been recruited from all over vulnerable communities. So it wasn't like an easy decision to lay off employees. So what we did was we quickly repurposed our factory to produce PPE products. So that's kind of how we repurposed our factory to stay afloat through the business. And on this journey, we joined forces with 12 MSMEs here in Ethiopia. Amazing entrepreneurs. Some of them are actually here on this asset audience, and what we approach many development partners to see how we can be working as a partner. So Mastercard Foundation was the most timely answer we received, and they helped us or supported us in terms of building our company into recovery and resilience. And all of the businesses from the 12 companies, we stopped being competitors. We joined forces and started sharing knowledge, started sharing manpower in terms of design and other aspects, because this was a new world or a new normal for us. So to see how we can repurpose, how we can stay afloat. So sharing knowledge was very, very key for us, and sharing also in terms of how to maneuver throughout this business was also important. But the most important lesson we have taken was how to build resilience afterwards, how to be, because we don't know what's going to happen, right? It just suddenly happened. So we were like, okay, let's come together now. And we started brainstorming and created a one concept, and it's called Oneness now. So we'll be able to stand against anything that may come towards us together. So we wanted to be an example and a pioneer in the ecosystem in terms of SMEs can come not only as clusters, but not only as competitors, but together in terms of being or defending ourselves through the pandemic or any other business challenge you can come to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Semal, to hear from you, and especially just to hear how you are able to pivot from that and be able to even build strategies for future pandemics. Now, let's wind up the conversation with Nasima. Nasima, please share with us what COVID-19 meant to you in terms of the challenges you have experienced. And also, we'd like to just get a peek from you on your outlook on business in the post-pandemic world. Nasima, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Doreen. Hello, everyone. This is Nasima Tanisha, President, Women and E-Commerce Forum, WE, and Managing Director of Reverie Corporation. And also, I am serving as a Joint Secretary of E-Commerce Association of Bangladesh, which is ECAB. I started my working life in 2005 when my father was in deathbed. That time, I took responsibilities of my father's business. After I completed my responsibilities, I have started my own entrepreneurial journey in 2010, which is a software company named Reverie Corporation. I made mobile apps, games, and e-commerce solution for the people. That time, I have faced so many difficulties. As a woman, I felt that we need a particularly woman-based platform. Then I decided and opened a platform named Women and E-Commerce, WE, the largest platform for Bangladesh for women. 1.2 million members are in this platform now, and 4 lakhs are women entrepreneurs, purely women entrepreneurs. And the challenges about you asking, Doreen, if I started from during pandemic situation in 2020, that was a very difficult situation for Bangladesh. We have faced a huge loss in Pohela Boishakh, which is our traditional occasion, the largest traditional occasion. That time, people went into depression. I thought people will die in depression before virus attack. I decided to set some rules for our group. No negativity will be allowed in our group. No death notice will be allowed in our group. We plan to develop their skill by various type of training. We tried to focus on their sale and we have succeeded, alhamdulillah. But some challenges are there. Smooth delivery from rural sector is the biggest challenge, and door-to-door internet connectivity. As they're connected from rural sector, they don't have any Wi-Fi connection. They use only mobile data, which is costly for them. And another challenge is excess of funding. Our entrepreneurs doesn't need actually too many funding. They doesn't need crore of money. They only need small amount of funding. But the long process of getting loan is making them hopeless. They need to open an account in bank and start transaction for 6 months, and then they can apply for loan. But the process is a very time-taking and long process. But the main challenge after post-pandemic, I feel that hold their interest in the work, creating a large field of work for them. They are very micro, small entrepreneurs and connected from different remote parts of Bangladesh. We have a very good market globally for our local products. This is an opportunity if we can use it. So exporting our local product in a good channel is very much needed. Post-pandemic situation, I feel that this sector will create a buzz, inshallah. If I add a story, if I allow, there are hundreds of stories in our web platform, hundreds of or thousands. Let me share just one. Last year during lockdown, so many people were jobless suddenly. So many people didn't get salary properly. That time, the housewife of who never ever imagined of doing business in her life, she has came forward to take the responsibility of her family. First of all, they don't know how to do it, what to do it. We encourage them to come forward with their food skill or anything, any skill they have. I do believe that Almighty have sent us with some particular skill. So some of them start their entrepreneur life with making bread, making pickle, handmade ornaments, selling handloom sari, etc. And then they turned out nicely during this pandemic. Told you, we have thousands and hundreds of story in our we group. This is truly inspiring. So many life-changing stories, I might say. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Semhal. Thank you, Nasima. And also just, highlighting, giving a story that's inspirational. I'm sure there are so many of us that are in the conversation, and we're not only here to just discuss the challenges, but to hear some of those inspiring stories of how women are pivoting. So thank you so much, Rehab, Nasima, and Semhal, for sharing your journey with us. I would now like to invite Sonal. She's the Gender Equality and Social Inclusion Lead at MSC and our moderator for today's panel. Over to you, Sonal.
Thank you, Doreen. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, you are. You're audible. Go ahead.
Great. So thank you so much, Simhal, Rahab, and Nasima Appa, for the incredible inspiration that you shared with us. Thank you, Doreen, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on which side of the world you are in today. I'm Sonal, and I'm very pleased to be here today. We have an extremely distinguished panel to discuss today's topic, which is women-owned enterprises amid COVID-19 strategies to support their survival, revival, and recovery. And you've just heard the inspirational stories. Why is it so important? Um, Sorry, there's something happened to my computer. So I would, without taking a lot of time, I just wanted to briefly give you the context and then introduce our excellent panel for today. We have all been through, right now, the worst humanitarian crisis of this century. It has laid bare the inequalities and the dysfunctional systems really that we are living with. The crisis has been especially hard on women. It has disproportionately affected women's incomes, their livelihoods, their enterprises. It has increased several times the burden of their unpaid care work, and it has further squeezed their access to already limited resources and opportunities. Whatever evidence that we have till now says that the impact of COVID-19 on women's economic and productive lives is going to be disproportionate, and it's going to be different from men. And across the globe, we already know that even before the pandemic, women earned less, they saved less, they were holding less secure jobs, they were more likely to be employed in the informal sector. They have less access to social protection overall globally. Women entrepreneurs typically also tend to operate in the most disadvantageous sectors. And if we talk of those sectors right now, those are the hardest hit by the crisis, like, for example, tourism, manufacturing, garments, and services. Most of our women entrepreneurs are at the lower ends of the value chain, where there is little or no opportunity to do value add and actively work for scaled up business growth. Their capacity hence to absorb economic shocks like the crisis becomes much less than that of women, than that of male enterprises. So why are we talking about entrepreneurship today? Because entrepreneurship still remains the strongest pathway to economic independence for millions of women, that we work with, especially in low-income countries. So it's extremely important that we enable growth of women-led enterprises. We create a more gender sensitive ecosystem of entrepreneurship that is proven to have multiplier effects, on decent employment, on poverty eradication, on economic growth, etc. And we've already heard the experiences of, three path breakers. They've given us a peek into what it really means to drive a woman-owned business during a pandemic. All three of them are at the cutting edge of their fields. Rahab is one of the few entrepreneurs in the male-dominated field of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Simhal has created a popular brand from scratch, and she employs more than 100 people, 80 to 90% women, which is an amazing feat. Nasima Appa of the V Forum has created a 1 million strong community of women micro entrepreneurs, and she's provided market access through social commerce. She's provided digital onboarding to millions of women who can now access market opportunities. So, what can we do to ensure that more such women entrepreneurs are supported in their journeys? And we learn about it today from our excellent panel. And can I request Saloni that we have our panelists on the screen, please? And I'll request all my panelists to please switch on their videos. And let me first introduce Evelyn. Hi, Evelyn. Ms. Evelyn Stark has 3 decades of experience in financial health and inclusion. Most recently, she developed and led MedLife Foundation team's $250 million financial health strategy across 40 markets, including US, Mexico, India, and Bangladesh. She previously held leadership roles at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID, and CGA. She spent 6 years working from Uganda, covering sub-Saharan Africa, implementing programs on financial inclusion and working with financial institutions to improve their capacity to serve low-income consumers with high-quality products. Welcome, Evelyn. Welcome to the panel. Can we?
Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Our next speaker is Ms. Jamie Zimmerman. Hi, Jamie. Welcome to the panel. Jamie leads the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's work to increase low-income women's economic empowerment through access to and usage of digital financial services. Prior to this, Jamie led the team's efforts to drive global-scale digital financial inclusion. Prior to this, Jamie led the team's efforts to drive global-scale digital financial inclusion by cultivating partnerships which accelerate and maximize collective impact. And before joining the foundation, she has been an independent global advisor to several organizations, including the World Bank, CCAP, USAID, UNCDF. Welcome, Jamie. Thanks for joining the panel. Our third speaker is Ms. Joyce Mushena. Joyce is the gender lead at the MasterCard Foundation. Joyce provides leadership and technical guidance on the foundation's institutional and programmatic approach to gender and inclusion, primarily towards achieving 70% reach to young women as participants in the Young Africa Work Strategy. Joyce is passionate about inclusive social development and has led various strategic change initiatives for over 2 decades in both development and humanitarian sector, with a focus on women and young people in Africa. Welcome, Joyce. Thank you for joining the panel today. And finally, we have Mr. Nicholas Koloff join us today. Nicholas is the Executive Director at the Arjudis Foundation. His career has focused on developing enterprise-related solutions to poverty. With Arjudis, his focus has been on developing business support ecosystems and especially on identifying what are the characteristics of an effective business development intervention and how to improve businesses' access to knowledge, talent, and finance, small and medium businesses. He was also the founder of Opportunity International in UK. with opportunity, he helped start two MSME banks in Eastern Europe and an investment fund for financial inclusion for Eastern Europe. Welcome, Nicholas. We apologize for this skewed gender balance today, but I hope you do with it today. So welcome to the panel, Nicholas. So without any further delay, I would start with my first question to Evelyn. What we want to start the discussion with is, do we really understand the impact of the crisis till now? We know that we have a plethora of data already, but do we really understand what the crisis has done to women's entrepreneurship? So, Evelyn, let me come with my first question to you. The data shows that all MSMEs have been impacted by the pandemic. What are those key socioeconomic issues that have made women entrepreneurs more vulnerable in terms of their own financial health and in terms of expanding their businesses? So over to you, Evelyn.
Thank you, Sonal, and thank you to MSC and to the whole panel. And I think Rahab, Nassima, and Samal have already addressed some of the key issues. Women do much more unpaid labor and caregiving, about 5 times that of male counterparts, and therefore were going to be even more impacted during the pandemic. I think Nassima talked about the difficulty MSMEs faced in accessing finance. About 80% of women lack access to good finance. MSME women lack access to good financial products. I think almost everyone on the call will know they have a lower access of collateral. 95% of them are in informal businesses. All of these things make it far more difficult. We also have women have lower levels of education, and lower levels of digital literacy, which combines also to lower use of mobile phone. And then add on things like the social norms about whether women can even use a phone or access the mobile internet. And that's on the digital side. On the physical side, women's safety and ability to have agency over their movement. So there are so many issues that align in normal times that are exacerbated by the pandemic times. And again, I think there are 3 women who opened up the panel really showed how important this is. And let me leave it there and let my colleagues answer.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. Exactly what you said. All of the factors and the disadvantages definitely compounded even in the normal times, and we're talking about the impact of the pandemic over and above, all of this. My next question is to Jamie. Jamie, what do you think have been some of the short-term and long-term impacts of COVID-19 on women entrepreneurs? Have we been able to understand, how they are going to be impacted both in the short and the long term?
Thank you, Sonal, and it's great to be here and see some familiar faces and some new ones in here from Rahab and Nassima and Simhal. Such inspiring stories and also daunting ones to hear about, and especially hearing about the challenges that they faced and knowing that they are already fairly well established enterprises, already operating digitally in a lot of different ways. And so even with the challenges that they faced and all of the ways that they have been squeezed, they have been able to find to find the supports and find ways to be resilient through through the pandemic to date. And I imagine, and I think about, how we have 90% of all businesses globally are MSMEs, and women. These are not monoliths, and women-led SMEs and small firms are not a monolith. And so, those who were able to withstand the pandemic in some ways, there are many others who this was not a squeeze; it was complete devastation. So, I think about the short and long term impacts. It's hard to generalize what these might be, but I think when we look at something between 170 million informal enterprises, all the way to just how much of an imprint small women-led small firms have across the globe, this is a huge impact on those who are leading firms and those who work with these firms. I think between a squeeze and devastation is a large range, but I think what it means is that the hopes and dreams of different entrepreneurs, whether you are an entrepreneur because you have to be out of necessity, or because you want to be and you want to build and grow your business, what was already an inhospitable context and environment just became substantially more so. As you and Evelyn have already said, the women-led businesses are more likely to be smaller, more likely to be informal, less likely to be digitized, which means less likely to be able to offer digital payments or to digitize their business operations, or offer digital purchasing options from suppliers. So when footfall plummets, when supply chains are squeezed, they're squeezed even more. So that means less likely to cope with these this kind of dramatic disruptions in supply chains, changes to business costs, and being disproportionately informal. And I think this is really important, really less likely to be targeted for or eligible for stimulus support, for government-led stimulus support. So, to be unseen in kind of your economy and by your government, in this case, became a huge problem short-term in the pandemic, as we saw governments in over 200 countries and territories massively ramp up their social protection stimulus packages as a response to COVID, and by and large really push for digitizing and finding ways to pay those digitally. If you don't have a digital footprint, it was much less likely that you were going to be able to get that support. So I think also short term, kind of bigger picture, there has been, I think, in a positive sense, this kind of explosion of focus on the problem, and that this is something that we need to be paying attention to and doing something about. That I've countless numbers of conversations and op-eds and articles and webinars on the impact of COVID on small women-led small enterprises, the impact on women's work, this focus on caregiving, and this disproportionate kind of weight of running a business and running a household and having the social and cultural constraints in a lot of contexts. I have never seen a focus on it the way that we're focusing on it now. And I think that so short term, that is a positive impact. And looking optimistically at it, I think it shifts to, my one thought on long term. I think there's a lot that remains to be seen about how this all plays out. But I think long term, we still have a choice about how this is all going to land. And I think, we can either watch these barriers and gaps widen and grow, so, those who were already digitized, those who were already in digital ecosystems, you saw rapid shifts in their ability to weather the pandemic, and those who were not already there, they've found they're, less likely to do so. And I fear that we're going to see an acceleration and exacerbation of those gaps. That could be an outcome, but I also think another long-term outcome would come from us leveraging this moment. Those of us in the private sector who lead philanthropy, those who are guiding the businesses and providing the tools for us to leverage this moment, lean in and address kind of the broad range of gaps and barriers that are keeping women from being able to have a formal presence, to digitize their operations, to leverage digital tools, to support their aspirations. But we need to make those systems and tools work for them. That's kind of number one. But this is I think we're in this moment now where we can really lean into that. And conversations like this, I think are part of that journey, and really appreciate that you're convening it today. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jamie. I really what hit was majority of our women are in the informal sector, and the price of remaining unseen has a lot of long-term consequences. But I like how you pointed out that in the long term, we have to see how this explosion of focus on women entrepreneurship, and a lot of talk about it, plays out actually in terms of action and supporting them on the ground. So thank you, Jamie, and we'll next go to Joyce. That several countries right now are dealing with not just the first, but also the second and the third wave of the pandemic. So we see India is still not out of the second wave. Indonesia and our neighbors in the Southeast Asia are dealing with terrible, second waves of the pandemic. So we already have a plethora of data, Joyce, on the impact of the first wave. What additional work do you think it needs to be done right now to deepen our understanding on the impact of the later waves of the crisis? So are we just at a point where we're seeing the tip of the iceberg, or the 90% of the impact remains submerged? We'll hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. So now, please let me know if my voice is coming out well.
Yes, Joyce, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Evelyn and Jeremy. I think you kicked it off very well. And so I hopefully won't have to repeat myself on this one. But just wanted to point out what Jeremy brings out as the silver lining on the pandemic, really, in terms of turning the spotlight on issues affecting women in a way that hasn't been done before. Like there have been, conferences since Beijing and so many other conversations. But I think in the last 20 months or so, there has been so much, a flood of information coming from all quarters about what is happening in the lives of women. And so at the MasterCard Foundation, and very, very pleased that Rehab and Semal spoke earlier. Really, those are the people who keep us awake and excited every day. We are looking at all the things that are being done and said, and our focus is on segmentation and granularity. If you listen to Evelyn, if you listen to Jamie, we are referring to various categories of women. Whether you're talking about women in business or you're talking about just women doing life, the heterogeneity of their situations and their needs is so massive. So on the one hand, we have the silver lining, but on the other, we run the risk of taking a homogeneous perspective and failing to respond to the needs of young, of various categories of people, taking into account their age, taking into account their circumstances, their geographies. And when you listen, for example, to Nasima, the circumstances of young women or women generally in rural setups is so dire. So we are looking at, for example, three main categories of women entrepreneurs to be able to meet their needs. And one of the categories is the invisible. And I think that's a category really that Nasima referred to by and large, and then when you heard Jamie talking about those that really kind of completely got swept out of the market, perhaps never to come back. So the invisibles, what kind of things would they need? Do they even qualify for loaning actually? Or are those the kind of women who are selling very tiny wares right in the front of where they live, and probably they can benefit from a grant and support that helps them to grow to be able to qualify even for collective kind of engagement. The second category of women entrepreneurs we're looking at are the bootstrappers. Those that are mobilizing resources from families, mobilizing resources from friends, and starting up business. And I think Evelyn mentioned that sometimes they'll start businesses because they are entrepreneurial, but oftentimes it's really need driven. I mean, they're not gonna watch themselves just drown. They will just do something to stay afloat. And oftentimes these bootstrappers are struggling, with digitization, struggling with access to resources, but most importantly, access to market. Probably they are producing, but really the connection to the market is broken. There are value chains, for example, when you look at fresh produce in agriculture, for instance, the standards, the speed with which the produce has to get to the market, the warehousing, the logistics, the transportation, all coupled with the barriers that Evelyn mentioned, mobility, less access to skills, and so on and so forth, they keep struggling. So the bootstrappers, in our view, would benefit from a whole combination of help aside from the financial assistance. And finally, I think when you look at women succeeding in businesses, we are categorizing that as the gazelles. They are making it, they want to move to the next level. They are out there looking for venture capitalists and a big kind of financial investments. So what needs to be done, what more can be done, is really that level of analysis and that level of granularity. The second thing that I think we can do as a global community is the engagement of new actors. It's almost like the responsibility of governments to create enabling environments, but it's also the responsibility of private sector to expand those spaces and create, more opportunities for women to plug in and acknowledging the historical inequalities that has been alluded to very well. It will not be enough to just say, let's talk about this. We have to move from talk to action. My question would be, and that's what we are actually grappling with within the foundation, is what will incentivize greater investment by private sector, by public sector, not only in finances, but in the supportive services that sustain that, supportive services around childcare, supportive services to ensure safety and security of women, supportive infrastructure, including access to digital facilities. So solving the information asymmetry of women, creating access and utilization of the market-driven services, but also tackling the barriers that are very specific to the gender roles. That level of investment is often broken. So we are almost looking at women economic empowerment plus, plus covering for the things that stand in the way, even when you give them the finances. I would like to stop here, Sona, and definitely this is a conversation that we can carry on and on. but in the interest of
Sure.
time, allow me to pause.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyce. You beautifully put it that we run the risk of homogenizing. So, women belong to different contexts, and we need to understand that there are different situations and accordingly support them. And also the three different categories you say that you are looking to support broadly, contextualizing the support in terms of necessity entrepreneurs or opportunity entrepreneurs, and providing them a whole package of services. Great, thank you, Joyce. And with that, I would move to Nicholas. Nicholas, we have already spoken, a lot about barriers, and we know that the Argyris Foundation does some incredible work on supporting small businesses. So, in your experience, when the enterprises were impacted by such economic shocks and these black swan events. So, for example, in India, this was not only to one. I'm just giving an example of India. So it was demonetization before that, and then came the pandemic. So there are several black swan events that the small and micro sector has to deal with. So when you see the small and micro sector on the path to recovery, trying to survive, what are the key barriers you see on their path to this recovery and survival, and then growth, of course?
Well, thank you, and it's lovely to be here and to contribute. I think that to build on what other people have said, this information asymmetry, because in a crisis, even those services that wish to help people in a crisis tend to revert to who they know and what they know. So one of the barriers has been for both in the financial sector and also in the technical support sector, is one's tended to work with one's existing partners. Now, if your existing constituency is only partly visible and the invisible remain invisible, then they're going to be doubly disadvantaged, because the assistance that's going to be available for them is simply not going to be there. And I think that, so there's that information asymmetry, and there is indeed the need to significantly contextualize who we're talking about. As Joyce was saying, we need to think about segmenting enterprises into different contexts, both in terms of their size, both in terms of their trajectory of growth, where they're located, are they urban, are they rural, are they peri-urban, and of course, who owns them. Importantly, women, men, jointly, and so forth. And I think that if you look at, and often this invisibility even goes to the point of, it's not that they're already there, but nobody's paying them any attention. So, for example, working with a large commercial bank that had 1 million MSME clients on their books, except they didn't know. Most of those clients were booked as private clients of the bank, so they weren't seen as business clients. So when you get a crisis and the business comes to the bank, the bank doesn't recognize it, because even though they're a customer, they're still not capable of recognizing that. So these kinds of structures by which you help institutions get better at segmentation, structuring products around appropriate segmentation, and thinking of all the design issues that are reflective of that. And some of those have already been touched on. Women are not owners of collateral. You can't design financial products, even for businesses that are in the dynamic or growth stage, and imagine that you're going to collateralize those loans. They need to be cash flow based. In order for them to be cash flow based, the bank needs a certain amount of information in order to de-risk that. What does that look like? So there are these sorts of trajectories. There's also the recognition, I think, that in the non-financial support framework, we do a lot of work around business development services, is that in crisis, the importance about helping people be resilient is as much about helping them psychologically navigate the challenges as it is of thinking of technical solutions. Time and again, last year and this year, when talking to our partners, what's been the most important thing the entrepreneur has actually received from you? How would they speak about that? They speak about that. They actually called us and talked to us. How is it going? And even if it was only how is it going, and allowing the person at the other end to emote, to feel frustrated, to express their frustration, that itself has a really important dynamic. You should never exclude the importance of building relationships and building resilience through relationships. But it's certainly true that almost all the data, we've already seen that. So even when enterprises were growing, and we carry results, our partners work with about 25,000 small and growing businesses each year. We're analyzing the 2020 results. They are gender disaggregated. You can see that number of businesses, which is about 20%, which are actually growing. And because they're in business sectors which have benefited or at least been less challenged by, and some actually benefited by a global pandemic, creates market opportunity as well as destroys it. Women's own business have been growing more slowly. So and they've been shrinking more rapidly. So when they're growing more slowly, and if they're shrinking more rapidly, and for all the sorts of reasons that we've already noticed. The sectors they're usually in, service orientated, the caregiving, which takes people's attention away from business, particularly at a crucial moment when you need to be really focused. You can't be because of those obligations, felt obligations. All of those patterns. Digitalization, yes, less digital literacy, less access. Less engagement, and it affects both kinds of enterprise, the ones that trajectory and growth, and the ones that are also shrinking, and preliminarily probably by a factor of about 10 to 15%. So 10 to 15% less growth, 10 to 15% more shrinkage.
That's super interesting, Nicholas. Thanks for sharing those insights, and I really like how you said that there is, we have to put responsibility back on the providers as well, because if the bank already has 1 million customers and not recognizing that they need to serve them and they need to serve their needs, then there is something really wrong with the supply side systems as well. So, and definitely the importance of gender disaggregated data, the importance of segmentation, so that we could really understand which sector, how they're performing, and definitely the nuances of what is the sector, what is the size, what is the age of the business, and provide them with highly contextualized support. Thank you so much for those insights, Nicholas. And I would now actually move back to Evelyn. Evelyn, we have the next round of discussion. We will start with you in terms of what are the key opportunities we see to build back better. We know that the impact of the pandemic has been devastating, and several other factors that we've discussed. In your view, what are the key opportunities you see emerging from the pandemic to further the financial health of women MSCs, and what roles, so it's additional part of the same question, what roles do you see the public and the private sector play in this, in this regard?
Thanks, Sonal. And I have to say, I'm going to repeat quite a bit of what my fellow panelists have said. And going back to our earlier speakers as well, because I think what we've seen during the pandemic is this uptick in digitization, even amongst women, although it still lags. But so I think digitization and collaboration are two key things that I think you've heard several times, and I think are the way to move forward. And the collaboration that Nassima talked about is collaboration amongst women. I think we also heard it from our other colleagues too. So if women are already willing to collaborate and share information and can do so even more broadly using technology, clearly that is a tool and an opportunity for all of us to utilize and to support organizations that are capable of bringing together women in that way. I think Jamie already nailed it on government. You have to understand who is in the marketplace, who you are trying to reach for the government programs to work. And that's just an obvious place that we don't have enough good attention on that. So part of the collaboration is amongst donors and funders and organizations, nonprofits, and government to really collectively work on this issue. The measurement and disaggregated data is just key. One of the big issues on digital is we don't hold a lot of the fintechs or the mobile money providers to any account in terms of who are you serving. Part of it is, purely structural. If a woman's using her husband's phone or her son's phone, it's going to show up as a man is using the phone. So, there are issues that we have to figure out on how do we direct this to women? How do we know that we are reaching the women that we want to serve? And then one of the other things that we're doing, and it's something that we should have learned a million times over, is what we're counting and what we're measuring. So there are a lot of very interesting and very good programs that reach women as MSMEs. I was reviewing CFI's papers on social norms and on women MSMEs, and there was a good program with TIGO, and TIGO was providing advice, providing mentorship, reaching women. But the metric was how many women did you reach, right? So this is what we've done in financial education and that kind of thing for years. How many women, how many this, how many that, but not what did it do? So I'm far more interested in where are the women able to use your tips and tricks and your advice and your mentorship to increase sales, to join a collaborative platform that got them lower prices, et cetera. So we measure some things, but not enough to give us some qualitative information about what actually happened, or enough to develop better products and services through segmentation. So obviously, women is not a segment. We are 51% of the population, which is not a segment. So we need to remember this, and whether we call them gazelles, which I really happen to like, but we have to break it down and understand what we want to do. I think the opportunity on digital, I hope most of us have recognized that it's not a silver bullet. But it's an opportunity, and digital is here to stay, and we are going to continue to see it being used and expanded. And what I thought was great during the pandemic was how organizations very quickly pivoted to using tools that women already use. So I was doing some work actually with Sesame, and they were providing content on WhatsApp, and women were able to access and use those videos, respond to them very easily. WhatsApp was very familiar. And so then they started using it for further information and for further storytelling. Banco Itaú has a women's mentorship program that connects smaller businesses with larger women's businesses directly through WhatsApp, through phone, create that mentorship program. Boma in northern Kenya did a great job in using women's voices who were known in the community through their channels, through their digital channels, so that when you actually heard, it wasn't some robotic voice saying you should do this or you should do that. It was somebody that you could relate to. Oh, that woman did a really good job. Her business is growing, or she's managed to leverage these tools. So let me listen. So I do think that we have so many opportunities, at this time, whether it was a pandemic or not. These problems existed, these changes existed, the need for change existed. So this is really a focal point. I think Jamie said it well. This is the opportunity not to lose this momentum. It's very widely noticed. And I would point out, it's the same issue here in the US. Women have the higher care burden. They were missed in several government programs. They were less likely to have a bank account in order to receive government payments. So this is the good thing about this problem is that it is collective and global, which means there's more opportunities to look at it in different places for solutions. So that's what I hope to see, a coming together of public and private sectors to work collectively on this problem.
Thanks so much, Evelyn. Definitely, we need greater collaboration. Digital definitely is an opportunity that could be used better to support women much better. And of course, I fail to understand that it's 21st century, but we keep asking everybody to please collect gender disaggregated data, and especially the problems with the financial system. So it's very, very unfortunate. So what gets measured gets done, but we do see most probably, in most of the places and most of the systems, nobody is collecting adequate gender disaggregated data. When they do collect, it's not the right measures they're using. A lot of work needs to be done there. Thank you, Evelyn. My next question is to you, Joyce. So even before the pandemic, we know that the financial markets did not work well for women entrepreneurs. Most of the women entrepreneurs we know are concentrated in the informal sector. What are some of the opportunities you see, Joyce, as where financial markets could serve women entrepreneurs better, especially the informal segment, because that's where a majority of our women are concentrated and earning their livelihoods from them.
Thank you. Over to you. Thank you very much, Sonal. And just before I respond to your question, I would just like to mention that today's girls are tomorrow's women. So whenever I think about women in the informal sector, I ask myself, how did they get here? And so one of the most sobering realities around COVID is that it has almost threatened to undo the gains that had been done in the education for girls and in really enabling girls to stay in school, hence increasing their chances of finding themselves in more lucrative and more productive spaces. I was just recently reading a report by the Ibrahim Forum where it says that more than 1 million girls in sub-Saharan Africa will drop out of school or have already dropped out of school as a result of COVID, and the continent stands to lose over a decade of gains in school. Why am I saying this? It's because if we are going to solve the problem of women in the informal sector, we have to expand the choices that these women have. And choices will be expanded by more years in school, more agile learning that enables women to join TVET institutions and study something and really master it in order to be able to start a business in an area also where they have the skill and the confidence to be able to succeed. So for me, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, the question is, what kind of data and evidence is informing investment in women's economic empowerment? So when we think about supporting women, there's the problem of basing our choices on data that is not robust enough. But there's also the question of having many and coordinated efforts so that then the optimization of resources coming from various sources is missed, all to the disadvantage of women. So my sense of what else can be done, Sona, is having a system, whether it's really looking at country level data statistics offices, or looking at how funders coordinate and collaborate on deploying their resources. We do not know enough. And this is not just the mathematical quantitative elements. It's also the qualitative aspect. So when we talk about social norms, for example, and we're looking at businesses that women are running, what do we de-risk? Are we de-risking and guaranteeing the fact that women-led businesses will fail? Or are we de-risking and guaranteeing the stereotyping of women, which then kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy? Because if we are expecting them to fail, we don't deploy enough financial and non-financial support, and so they fail, and we almost say, oh, look, yeah, we had evidence, we knew they weren't going to succeed. So for me, in terms of data collection and analysis of how we know where to invest for how long in order for women to succeed, we'll need to be robust about both quantitative and qualitative analysis of data and information around women's businesses. So if, for example, we have psychometric information that tells us that women are generally better payers of loans, why is it then lenders are not falling over each other to look for those women and lend them? Because then they will have less of NPL in their book.
Yeah.
So how do we curate knowledge coming from that kind of information to work in the favor of various categories of women needing support to succeed in their businesses? The second element would be around data. What other credit, ways of calculating credit can we deploy, so that then we are not saying women do not have collateral, but they have social trust? How do we monetize the social trust and make it work in the favor of women? And this has worked very well with collectives. I think Jamie, the Gates Foundation has done some work on this. Women collectives have a story to tell. The other element would be ensuring that we are, not only deploying good science, but we are also staying the course with the women. So if honestly, there's data out there that says, this percentage of new businesses or startups will fail within the past 5 years, then it means we cannot leave women in the informal sector to the devices of the market. Certain supports have to be put in place. Non-financial supports such as access to market, being very deliberate about supporting them to really, really stay and become a business for the future. So that brings me to my second point around role modeling. And I'm glad Wangari and Semal and Nasima spoke earlier. I think we have such fantastic stories of women succeeding in business and what has worked for them. I only think that we are not telling them enough. So when we think about women entrepreneurship, women economic empowerment, the story is almost more from a negative perspective than from a celebratory perspective. So if a woman in an informal sector or in a rural sector or a woman anywhere has weathered the storm of COVID and succeeded, then that needs to be multiplied. We need to communicate. We need to bring them to these panels to speak to us and say how they did it. And like I said, I'm glad that Semal was here. It's really saying we need to tell the story of success. I am very much aligned with Evelyn's point that women are not a segment. I mean, we are more than 50% of the world's population. And so if we gathered success stories of women and did robust case studies, I think girls watching would be so inspired. And the ripple effect of that is that 10 years down the line, 20 years from now, we'll be sitting here and the story is going to be different. Pandemics will happen. They will have an impact, but the choices women have, the levels of resilience and their ability to weather the storm will have been built on good foundation, with consistent support that runs long enough for them to be on their feet and stay sustainable. Thank you very much, Sona.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joyce. Definitely, we need to tell much better stories. And in the interest of time, I have two more questions, one for Jamie and then for Nicholas. I will move to you, Jamie, now. In terms of opportunities, how do you think digital financial services could play a very important role in helping women entrepreneurs recover from this crisis? Because really the whole world is going digital. We need to ensure that women entrepreneurs can use and leverage digital financial services for their enterprises' growth.
Awesome. Thanks, Sonal. And I'll keep it brief. So I know we do want to get to some Q&A. And I think Joyce has said a lot, and Nicholas as well, about the role of digital and the ability to offer a robust number of different types of products and services, and also collect and measure data. So I'll just want to focus on a few things. And so just caveating to say that I don't think these are the only things that digital financial services can do to help women recover and thrive after the pandemic. But three things come to top of mind for me: support, resilience, and preparation, or building back. So one of the things that I think, and I've already said this, so I won't belabor it more, but having a digital footprint, being digitized, and having an ability to receive payments through DFS allows firms to be supported. Allows governments and grant makers and private sector to support firm owners and their employees during these types of crises. I think we've seen, this was a huge shock when this all happened, and I think the fact that we did not have tools, that really ready-made tools at our disposal to support these women-led small firms, MSMEs, was a huge wake-up call for us. We need to have a better way to do that, and I think digital financial services would play a very important role to build that bridge and connection. I think we did some rapid studies of this. and the impacts of it. A study out of Kenya showed that receiving an unconditional cash transfer via mobile money during the pandemic did increase the likelihood that any closed business would reopen significantly, and increase the overall financial health and even food consumption of the woman's household. So grants and emergency credit need to be easy, readily targetable. We need to be able to provide those. Digital financial services could help. It also would build more resilience to future shocks. These are channels for remote and contactless payments. It offers efficiencies for business processes, the ability to leverage digital data to get access to better, it may be cheaper, quicker emergency credit. It can help businesses be more efficient, and so nudging women to formalize their business operations, and in some cases can help develop confidence and aspiration to explore, newer potential kind of pathways for engaging in the digital space for their business, for skills enhancement, for customer engagement. And so you have a variety of skills and abilities and tools to access formed on the foundation of digital financial services and digitizing operations. And then finally is preparation. So, there's a big push for building back better. This is something we talk a lot about at the foundation. Women are at the center of all of our Build Back Better efforts, and pandemic preparedness in the future. A lot of other institutions are doing the same. We're not unique in that regard. But as Evelyn said, digital is here to stay. The digital economy and digital transformation is coming. And if we're not going to be left behind, then women-led businesses need to be able to compete and grow within a digital economy and grow within the markets that are also digitized. So I think we're going to see these big expansions of e-commerce and other types of platforms and products and services, and digital financial services provides a bridge and an entry point for being able to have access to those types of platforms and markets, and not just e-commerce and cross-border trade, but social media and collaborative platforms and associations like the collectives that Joyce mentioned. All those connections, digital financial services can facilitate and enable. So, of course, the huge caveat on this is that it requires digital infrastructure and digital access and digital literacy and digital ecosystems to make it useful. So, I don't want to force any woman onto a digital system or into a digital product that none of their customers can use and they don't value, and it costs them a bunch of money. And now they've been introduced to DFS in a way that actually does not have a value proposition for them. So I think that we need to be thinking a lot about, so women are not a segment, we are not a monolith. But there is something that is common across everything, and that is the foundations, the infrastructure, and the policy and regulations that we can build these types of more specific or unique tools and products and services on top of. And if we don't have those robust ecosystems in place, we're going to have a big challenge. So I think a lot of focus really needs to be in that ecosystem building and the infrastructure building. But if we can get that right, I think we can help women find ways to connect through digital financial services to the digital economy in ways that support and work for them and grow them from where they are and the aspirations that they have. So those are the three that come immediately to mind. Again, it's not exclusive to those, but I think if we can figure out how to leverage digital financial services for support, for resilience, and for building back better, we're going to be helping set women up to be able to revive and thrive after this pandemic. I'll stop there.
Wow. Thanks, Jamie. That definitely gave us a lot of food for thought, and I really like that you highlighted the fact that digital has to offer a true value proposition for women, and that the building blocks of digital has to be there, and there are so many building blocks that needs to be worked on, whether it's regulation or all the other things that we've been talking about for a long time. It's access, it's digital literacy, building women's capacities to use digital and giving them that affordable and universal access to digital. So thank you, Jamie. And Nicholas, we come back to you. for our last question before we take 3 questions from our audience, and we have more than 80 people join us today for the webinar. Thank you to all of you for taking out your time for joining us. And Nicholas, my last question to you is, what are some of the opportunities that you see to improve the effectiveness, the reach, and the quality of business development services for women entrepreneurs? Because really providing that support is a package, and unless and until we are able to contextualize, you did touch on it in your last address, but do share some more insights with us, and then we'll take 3 questions from the audience.
So thank you. So firstly, we have a much better sense now of what actually works in business development services than we did 5 years ago. So we should be applying that knowledge to design better services for all, obviously including women entrepreneurs. We should also recognize that actually access to non-financial business development services does make a difference, not only in times of growth, but also in times of crisis. So again, looking at our 2020 data, comparing it with data from the countrywide data, there's definitely a sense in which businesses continue to be able to function, to develop, to survive, if they have access to business development services rather than in the general population. So having access to those services is really important. And that's true with, again, against our disaggregated data, that's true about women entrepreneurs as well as men entrepreneurs. Then, of course, you have to design those services in order to make them women-friendly and women accessible. Digitalization is one of those ways, but again, as we've noticed, there are ways in which that can be as a barrier as well as a blessing. Not least because often digital services are designed by men, so and their functionality is designed by men. So there's a human design focus piece here. We need to get much better at gender design of digital services. But also thinking just very simply about, well, when do you provide your service? So if you think that people are going to go off and have access to their coach or their mentor or their trainer in the evening, well, you're not designing a very gender-friendly friendly service. So there's that, it's just very simple design things can make a really huge difference to people's trajectory and women being able to access these services as we go along. And yes, I think we have to think also about well, who pays for them? So that's the piece of the infrastructure. Now, if you look at Switzerland, where I'm sitting, the United States, many of the business development services are actually provided as public goods. It's a mixture of corporate, philanthropic, and public money. 94% of all accelerator programs in developed markets are funded through philanthropy, of one form or another, public or private. They're not paid for services. Now, entrepreneurs may pay towards those services. So we need a push to begin to encourage governments in particularly middle-income countries and then in lower-income countries to begin to take some of the burden of providing those services and ensuring those services are accessible to women, and ensuring that they're accessible beyond the capital cities where often they're now still located. And again, people think, digitalization is obviously the answer to that. Well, no. Go to rural Guatemala, you don't have a particularly strong internet infrastructure, and you certainly can't download things data-wise because it's just too expensive. So you have to begin to think about, so what does that mean? And then that percolates out right the way into the strategies that governments are designing to support enterprise. Many countries have them. They're of different quality. Almost all of them that I've seen are gender blind. And that's something that just well, when I say gender blind, I mean they make obeisances to women entrepreneurs in sort of the subtext, but actually when you get to the design details and the thinking, it's just not there. And that's not to criticize these governments, it's that they don't often have the capacity to begin to think about how to, again, to disaggregate, segment, think about their different market pieces in different ways, gender being one of the most critical ones. So those are just some of the things I think we need to do, but my main message is that was always that business development services actually work. They help in crisis, they help when not in crisis. We need more access to them, and we need a much more differentiated funding environment for them if they're going to be accessible to women in particular.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicholas. That's extremely important because what you mentioned, that business development services have to be a public good. And, in the countries that we are working with, this thinking, we are very, very far away from this thinking. Business development services are usually a part of donor-driven programs or some unstructured government programs here and there. But we do have evidence that business development support, financial and non-financial, is extremely essential for growth trajectory of a business that could, scale and employ people and, follow its usual growth. So definitely business development services have to be a public good, and that thinking and that discourse has to come. Better gender design, there is no getting away from that, because even what exists is extremely gender blind. So a lot of work needs to be done in terms of better, or I would say universal access to good quality business development services and gender sensitive business development services for women entrepreneurs. Thank you so much, Nicholas. And I would now move on to taking a few questions from our audience. So we have a question from Amy Hellman. This is a question for you, Jamie. How do we build digital capacity to incorporate the community building and relational benefits of face-to-face encounters?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. It's a really great question, and I also wonder if Evelyn or Joyce or Nicholas might have some thoughts on this. I think Joyce mentioned the role of collectives, and we at the foundation are firm believers in self-help groups, women's collectives, VSLAs, all the different ways that we call those. There are some really great examples of groups leveraging mobile phones for digital capacity building in the collective model, and coupling and bundling with that both the financial services, some literacy training, as well as support groups and mentorship, and kind of train the trainer sorts of models. Even bundling in things like household dialogues. CARE did this in Uganda, and it was some pretty impressive results out of the research that showed that this combination of some conversation, introduction of the digital service, doing the digital capacity building, and having some support within the group, but then also having conversations within the household to talk about social norms and different types of contexts and dynamics really had a really significant impact. I think that one's really interesting. I've seen also a new program out of USAID called Hey Sister, Show Me the Mobile Money, which is a really cool both digital and financial literacy mobile-based training tool that I think is now being rolled out in several countries, I believe in Africa, to sub-Saharan Africa to start, but that has some really cool both individually based modules, but has some extrapolation that can be done for the collectives. And so, I think that there are lots of cool models out there and some innovative ways that that's been happening. I absolutely am a firm believer in, the autonomy and agency that a mobile phone can bring to a woman, but also the power of collective, and that is such a strong, long-standing historical way for women to grow and be socially together and thrive economically together. And so I'm a big fan of models that aren't trying to dismantle the collective in favor of individual, but to build on top of it and to leverage that model to strengthen household level impacts and community level impacts. So I think that's one example. I'm sure that others Evelyn's been working in financial health and digital health for a long time. I'd be curious hey, Hamilton, I see is here from with the Hey Sister, Show Me the Mobile Money. So that's great. So yeah, I think that there are lots of good examples there, and I'm sure others will have some too.
Thank you, Jamie. Other question I see is for Joyce from Gitana Gobzi. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. So her question is, thank you for raising segmentation and the other need for integrating with other sectors, example, business support, as well as gender issues at household and community level. Can you highlight on these issues, example, good practices, especially for gender transformative interventions? Joyce, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sonal. I did an attempt at responding to Getana on the chat. Okay. I was actually hoping that Semal would be here because it would be really amazing to hear from her directly. Part of what Semal did with her company when they were pivoting towards, making I think face masks in the place of firing staff and letting them go, was also introduce childcare facilities within the company. And that is partly responsible for the 80% of the employees that are female that kept their jobs. And certainly, I want to believe that their level of motivation is also responsible for Semal's companies profitability. So that's really just one very basic example. We cannot do justice to this conversation really within a short time. But what I think is part of good practice is do not second guess women's needs. Ask them. They know. And be genuine about listening to them and curating tailor-made responses to their needs to the extent possible. Obviously, no single organization can do everything for women, but that is also where the power of collaboration and referrals and really connecting with other stakeholders would come in. So if anyone is interested in a truly gender transformative approach, we begin with really listening to the people whose lives we are discussing here on this panel, and they're not here even. But if we did listen to them, we would have such an easy life. So at the foundation, for example, because our focus is on young women, the constant question is when we are having a panel like this, and I think so now that's part of the reason where you ended up with Sema and Rehab is, aside from Joyce, who is the other person that is going to speak here? Where are the young women? So let's listen to them, really. That's what I would say. We will not run out of ideas on how to transform their lives if they are at the center and in front of every every intervention that we set for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joyce. And one last question, either one of you could take this one. My question, this is from Rahab. My question is, what are donors and funders doing to help solution providers, in bracket tech providers, to move from idea to proof of concept as soon as possible, so that entrepreneurs can benefit from this and get to reach their customers from the comfort of their home? Anyone could take this question?
I could throw in one. So at a couple of weeks ago at the Generation Equality Forum, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation made a $2.1 billion commitment to over the next 5 years to addressing gender inequalities, and a couple of years ago created a gender equality division to expand the work that we're doing to both look at women's economic empowerment, try to push for better and more systems for gender data and insights, focus on technology and innovation, looking at all kinds of different issues that are creating and exacerbating inequalities. One area that we're really focused on with that commitment is on women's economic empowerment, and in particular through women's financial inclusion, but not exclusively that. So really great question. I hear what you're asking for and the need. Would love to follow up with you, Rahab, on that. But just to say, we are turning attention to it. We are putting dollars behind it, and you're going to see a lot more from us in this space in the years to come.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jamie. And I do not have the capacity to summarize because there were such rich insights from all of you, but I would definitely say that there is a need for a lot of work. And as Jamie said, that there is an explosion of focus on these issues, which is unprecedented. So we do see disproportionate impact on women entrepreneurs, but I would borrow from my favorite author to say that these are the best of times, but these are also the worst of times. These are best of times because the Generation Equality Forum collectively saw a commitment of $40 billion, unprecedented in the history of gender equality. So after the Beijing conference, this was the first biggest gathering in these times that committed at the highest levels to work for gender equality. And it's not just talk, it is actionable commitments. So 40 billion committed for gender equality around the world, from the governments, from private sector, definitely gives us a lot of hope that we will have a lot more Semhals, Rahabs and Nasima Appas prospering in their businesses and becoming unicorns. And it will be a thing of past when we talk about women concentrated in the micro segment only. So we will definitely see many more women entrepreneurs growing with this kind of a commitment for gender equality. And we know the impact has been disproportionate, but all of the stakeholders here are committed towards mitigating that impact. So with that positive note, I would hand over to Doreen for closing remarks from Graham.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sona, for beautifully moderating this session. And also, as we move to close the session, let me thank our panelists, and not to forget Rahab, Semhal, and Nasima for these wonderful conversations, which I believe our audience has found very insightful. And finally, to our guests, we had about 100 plus participants for this session. We want to say a big thank you to you too for taking time to join us. Now, I'll not add much to what has been talked about, as the conversations, like Sonal has said, have been quite exhaustive. Just to mention that the session is recorded, and we will avail the recording to all of you, as well as host it on our website. Also, just requesting that you visit our website to see some of the extensive research reports that MSc has published over the last 1 year that touch on the different facets on the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, at this point, I'd like to hand over to Graham Wright, Group Managing Director for MSc, to give us some closing remarks. Welcome, Graham. Hi, Graham.
Thank you, Doreen.
Great.
Sorry, technologically challenged. We're talking about building digital capability, and I can't even turn on my microphone. First of all, let me thank the panelists for a great discussion, and the inspiring young entrepreneurs who joined us at the beginning to set the stage. Really appreciated the discussion, and it's just wonderful. I'm so old and dilapidated that I remember the Beijing conference really quite well. My wife was quite significantly involved in it. from Bangladesh, and it's really good to see gender back at the top of the agenda where it frankly belonged. And I hope this time we can keep it front and center rather than relegating it to a checkbox exercise, which is what happened alarmingly quickly after Beijing. So having made that somewhat sarky comment, let's move forward together to really ensure that women's inclusion, and by inclusion I don't want to limit ourselves to just financial inclusion, but indeed social inclusion, because so many of these barriers are socially driven. And I think that access to finance can actually play an important role in that. In Bangladesh, there's a concept of Loki May, which is the woman who runs the household budget effectively and well, and a Bangladeshi wife who is a Loki May is, a huge attribute for the household. And I suspect that echoes of that type of social construct are, prevalent in a lot of societies. And if the women are empowered and are able to run businesses and bring money into the household, it changes the dynamics within those households really quite significantly. So when we were working on microfinance, we were always talking about how, women will invest in the family and so on and so on. And I think that's true, but I think also women's collectives where women can support one another, and also that, as I say, that economic activity and value add to the household changes the social dynamics, and that is really, really important. One other just brief thought that I thought that occurred to me, Jamie saying seize the moment is absolutely right. This is the opportunity for us to get it right for a change, and the imperative of building back better in the context of climate change, I think, is really important as well. And that tends to lead to questions around the nature of economic activity and so on, and indeed the need for localization. And I think women can play a really important part in that sort of localization. But if a lot of that is going to be digitally driven and on platforms, which I think necessarily it probably will have to be, we have some serious barriers to overcome when it comes to the digital divide. So access in the first place, and then digital capability and understanding and the ability to really get the best out of those platforms, and indeed consumer protection. And I think one of the things that worries me a lot is that we are committed to, and rightfully so, bringing a lot of people into the digital world. I agree also with Jamie that we shouldn't insist on it and force people, but ultimately more and more of the world will migrate onto digital platforms. Now, we already know the level of abuse that is and challenges to consumer protection that is being exhibited across Asia and Africa, particularly in the context of digital credit, but elsewhere as well. And indeed, social platforms where a lot of really unpleasant things happen to women on Facebook and Twitter and so on and so on. So I would urge us also to think carefully about consumer protection as we bring women onto the digital platforms. So with those few random thoughts, let me once again thank you all. Let me urge all of us on this webinar to convert these fine words and fine ideas into action. And let me thank all of the participants who were persistent enough to continue with us to the end, and thank them very, very much for joining us. And again, thank the panelists. I know that you're all extremely busy, And so we're very grateful for such a generous slice of your time, particularly horribly early in the morning in Seattle. So thank you all.